genetically modified foods or GMO, the genetically modified organism, is a huge political issue right now. Lisa Breck, you're with Dr. Ahluwalia because you want to talk about what is the real information and science behind all this.
Yeah, because of course there's a ballot issue here in California legally mandating the labeling of genetically modified food. It has sparked a huge controversy and conversation about whether those foods are safe. Of course, Dr. Ahluwalia, we've been chatting a little bit about this. Right. Your feelings on whether or not these foods are safe.
Right. So first, let's talk about why we have these foods in the first place, right? So the foods, our crops are susceptible to diseases, to organisms, and other things that make them perish, right? So we use pesticides, we use other things to make sure our plants survive. The genetically modified versions are those that we make to be resistant to these things. So, for example, in Hawaii, there was a papaya, and it used to get infected with a ringworm, and we still don't know how to treat it. But a genetically modified papaya survived, and that's how we get the papayas from there. So the issue is...
What is the concern, though? What could this do to us?
Correct. So the concern is, these are not natural foods that we're eating. These are foods that have been genetically modified. DNA has been introduced into them to make them different. And so far, we only have plants. We don't have animals. But apparently, there's a salmon that's supposed to come on the market soon that may be approved, that may be genetically modified. So there's a lot going on. And the issue is, if we ingest these genetically modified foods, does that cause a problem? Can that cause cancer? Can that cause death? We don't know the answer to that. There was a recent study in France that they did on some rats that showed that perhaps there is a risk. But it was kind of panned because it was a small study. Yeah, exactly.
No, the food industry giants here in California have already spent $41 million to try and defeat this.
Right. Obviously, the price of food will go up. There's going to be a lot of labeling that has to be done on foods. But here's something interesting. The European Union, they ask for manufacturers and retailers to label their foods as genetically modified. And it hasn't really made that much of a difference in the marketplace. But the difference in our crop and what they do...
Because we're like all or nothing, right?
Right, exactly. So they allow a small percentage just because of seeping from different sources. But we have said zero. That means that anything that's not organic is probably not going to qualify for that.
Okay.
And the concern is that if we label all the foods as genetically modified, then suddenly we stop caring about it because everything is genetically modified. Right, exactly. So.
Moving on to types of therapy to help children who develop autism, have autism. Behavioral therapy is being shown as something that can really improve a child's life.
So, when we look at autistic children, a lot of time their interaction with other people is limited, right? They're more into inanimate objects. They kind of don't interact very well. And so this is the first time we've seen something like this where, when we treat these children with something called early, Denver modification kind of study, where we interact with them 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, involve the parents, do a lot of behavioral modifications, it looks like they interact better with human beings than they do with inanimate objects. And that gives us hope that we can change this. Yeah.
Dr. Ahluwalia, thank you as always. See you next week.
No, I didn't butt in only because my mic was off. but one of the arguments for GMO is that there are areas where a lot of pesticides were used. And once they build in this modification, you don't have to have pesticides. So even if there's a problem with GMO, it may be better than the pesticides.
Well, but Steve, they're using more herbicides instead of the pesticides. So do we know if they are better or worse? Yeah, we don't know.
Long term, we don't have an idea. And people take their sides, but we don't know. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Ahluwalia. Thank you, Lisa Breck.